Thank you for joining us today for our first installment of the Alumni Academy webinar series. My name is Annalise Piven, and I am the Director of Alumni Engagement at St. Louis University. Our goal with this series is to engage our alumni with the university and showcase the exciting work of our faculty and staff. And with our new reality of physical distancing, virtual events and webinars provide an exciting opportunity to stay connected regardless of location as a community. And with that, I am very excited to introduce our first Alumni Academy presenter, Dr. Dannielle Joy Davis, who will be providing tips and resources for teaching children at home. Dr. Davis is a tenured associate professor of higher education at St. Louis University. She is a faculty expert in the School of Education who conducts research on home education, has presented internationally and nationally on homeschooling, and has consulted over 200 homeschooling families nationally for 3 years. Additionally, growing up, Dr. Davis was periodically homeschooled by her mother and has been homeschooling her own child full-time for over a year. As a mother of 5-year-olds who is attempting to balance working from home and educating, I, for one, am very excited about Dr. Davis's presentation and the Q&A. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Dannielle Joy Davis.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Annalise, for inviting me here. And I'm so excited to share this information that's been a very huge part of my life in so many different ways, and that's homeschooling. My experiences with homeschooling, and also as a current homeschooler of my son, who is 11 years old. I also do research on homeschooling, as Annalise mentioned. So homeschooling and educating at home is a very big part of my life and has been for many, many years. So I welcome this opportunity to share what I know in whatever way that is useful to our community. So first of all, I thought it would make the most sense to share the various types of homeschooling. Now, I think that we are in an interesting situation in our nation in that a lot of people who are now educating at home did not necessarily plan this event and did not plan that their children, whether they're K through 12, would be at home learning from home. And many parents were not expecting, of course, this responsibility. So I think that's one key difference between homeschoolers prior to the pandemic and us as a community now in terms of education, where both we have the long-time homeschoolers, such as myself, and people who are new to the experience. So the one thing that I think makes sense is to share how homeschooling can take place in varied ways. So to give you an example, some of the major types of homeschooling, they may be more traditional homeschooling. Traditional homeschooling, I would say, is the closest to the brick and mortar school experience within the homeschooling realm, where typically the parents have the children wake up at a specific time, they're at the dining room or kitchen table at a specific time, they have a very structured schedule throughout the day. And I would say that this traditional style of homeschooling probably is the closest to the brick and mortar homeschooling that many individuals who are experiencing with education within our crisis are experiencing right now, traditional homeschooling. However, there is more than traditional homeschooling. Homeschoolers are quite creative. There's everything from traditional homeschooling on one spectrum all the way to what some people call unschooling. And what unschooling is in essence holding that simply living throughout the day and interacting with parents, with the community, with family members, that just simple living and living a good life and being involved in your community, that in itself is going to provide learning opportunities for children, and that through this quote unquote unschooling experience, which is, as you can imagine, the total opposite of traditional homeschooling. The unschooling experience basically says, you know what, we are going to live day to day. There's no sitting down at a specific time and teaching lessons. There's no, you must have this report in at a certain time. Unschoolers, no, do not do this. In essence, they say, okay, let's call grandma, okay? And when you call grandma, how about you ask her about her experiences? A lot of people are getting sick and going to the hospital. Ask grandma about maybe one of her experiences in a hospital setting, and learn from that and grow from that. And in essence, this interview of grandma is a type of lesson in terms of history, social studies, right? And also just naturally connecting with a family member. So those are the two spectrums, or the two extremes of homeschooling. And then there's everything in between. There's something called forest schooling. Now, unfortunately, because parks are closed, forest schooling is a little bit more challenging these days. But in essence, what forest schoolers do is, in essence, they travel to national parks, local parks, and they make the park setting itself a living laboratory of science, right? In essence, they let the walking and hiking experience be learning. They study the various trees that are on the walk. In a lot of settings, such as if you go to our local Powder Valley Park, Powder Valley actually post the type of tree on the various trees. They give you the exact type of tree that it is, and it gives the scientific name of the tree and traditionally how that lumber is used. Forest schoolers hone in on this and use nature, in essence, nature, to teach science, to teach history, to teach other aspects, right? They're very creative about this. So there's forest schooling, there's game schooling. And this is something that is somewhat new to me, but also very exciting to learn that there are parents who, in essence, because they know their children and they know this works well, in essence, they creatively center curriculum upon specific games, right? So in essence, to teach spelling, they may have during the week Scrabble. We will play Scrabble twice a week, right, as a family. And in that, they're teaching vocabulary, building vocabulary, they're teaching spelling, right? Of course, they're going to be teaching the use of the word within a sentence as well, right? So this is an example of how game schoolers use traditional board games. Note I said traditional board games and not video games, all right? So they use traditional board games to educate their children, everything from Scrabble to Pictionary in terms of art and creativity. So there's so many ways that parents throughout the world have used game schooling to educate their children, to bring life into the learning experiences so their children can enjoy the experience, right? Very good. So those are just some of the types of homeschooling. There's even something called eclectic homeschoolers. And I proudly consider myself an eclectic homeschooler. And in essence, what an eclectic homeschooler does is they basically draw from all of the homeschooling methods, all of the ones that I mentioned, and even more. And they mesh those homeschooling methods together to meet the needs of their children, right? Because every child is different. What works well in my household may not work as well in your household, right? So eclectic homeschoolers recognize that and say, you know what? We're going to build something new and unique specifically for this specific child that works for this child, that meets the goals for us as a family and the goals of the child as well, right? So that's eclectic homeschooling, and I definitely consider myself eclectic in that I draw from everything from traditional homeschooling to forest schooling to game schooling to even world schooling, in essence, using travel as a way to teach history and social studies, right? So these are various ways that people educate and the types of homeschooling. And now I think it's very important for us to think about time and place in terms of homeschooling. Now, I have learned this based upon my own personal experiences with homeschooling in terms of being homeschooled during points of my life by my mother, but also through my work with over 200 homeschooling families over the years, as well as research. And based upon all of those, I've learned that the range in terms of a specific time to homeschool young people, it ranges. Everything from 1 hour a day to 6 hours a day. All right. Now, of course, that's going to change based upon your child's age, right? When my son was 2, I wouldn't even think about having him homeschooled for 6 hours a day, right? He's 2, right? So when children are younger, I would say from 2 to 5, you know, 30 minutes to 1 hour is plenty, right? When children get older, typically that's when parents get into more than an hour a day. And again, that varies widely, family to family. And I think one thing that's very important to think about here is to think about purpose. Okay, so this is parental pre-planning. Okay, I know that a lot of parents who are registered for this were not anticipating having to be a teacher at home, right? But like any good teacher, there needs to be some sort of pre planning involved when you teach your children. Okay. And I think that that's important for everyone to understand that yes, we weren't expecting this as a society, but now parents are being called, and I would say it's required that pre planning is involved. I'm not talking about weeks and weeks of planning. We don't have weeks and weeks to pre plan. What I'm saying is take time, 2 hours. I firmly believe that any parent can easily do this in 2 hours. To take 2 hours of your time, the time of a movie, right? Take 2 hours of your time and think about, okay, what is my overall purpose as an educator of my child, for my child, right here, right now? What's my purpose? Is my purpose to help fill in any gaps that he or she may have? Are they struggling in a certain area? Do they need help with their multiplication tables? Are they struggling in chemistry? Whatever gaps they had before the crisis, now is a wonderful opportunity to help them fill in those gaps. Perfect opportunity to strategize and help them fill in any gaps that existed prior to the crisis, okay? So that may be one of your purposes, right? Another purpose may be looking at issues of emotional health, right? I know that sometimes kids, particularly in our traditional school system, they struggle when they get something wrong, right? Or if they don't do well in a certain subject, it's like, oh, woe is me, I got a C, all is lost, right? But this is the perfect time to attend to your child's emotional thought processes in terms of education. Perfect opportunity because you as a parent can take the time every single day. You can make this as part of your purpose to say that, you know what, let's develop a growth mindset. Okay. And in a growth mindset, and you can look this up on the web if you like, but in essence, a growth mindset is basically saying, you know what? We are all growing within the learning process, right? And the growth process takes time. And that say we don't hit the mark today, the growth mindset says that is okay. We'll just go back tomorrow and continue, right? And that not meeting the mark today does not mean that the child's a failure. It does not mean that all is lost and that you cannot educate your child. It doesn't mean that at all. The growth mindset says that we are always growing, we are always learning, and to just stay on that trajectory, right? And that all will be well if we stay in the growth mindset, the mindset that we're always developing ourselves, okay? And that everyone, in essence, if you want to be excellent at something, you're always going to be growing and developing and strategizing on how to reach that next level, right? So that's something that you can include in your purpose as well, all right? Another thing that you may include in your purpose, maybe your purpose may not be filling in gaps, but maybe your purpose is just simply mastery over a given content. And there's quite a bit out there related to mastery based education. But in essence, in a nutshell, what it says is you work with your student until mastery of a given concept is attained. All right. And I experienced this firsthand when my son was in fourth grade. He had an awesome teacher that really took hold of this mastery based concept. And in essence, the way that the class, and this was in public school, I pulled my son out of school when he was in fifth grade. Fourth grade was excellent. And I think part of the reason is because of the way the teacher taught. And in this mastery based way of teaching, in essence, the teacher would teach. The child would turn in work or complete an assignment. If that assignment was not up to par, the teacher would say why that assignment was not up to par. And then the student would have to go back, address those gaps, fill them in until it was up to par. So in essence, the teacher basically worked in such a way that it was he was a male teacher, he would not let kids fail. It just didn't happen because he would make the kids work until it was an A, right? So in essence, with that in mind, as I started homeschooling my son when he was in fifth grade, the next level, I said, you know what? That was an awesome year. You seem to really thrive under mastery centered education. We're just going to do that at home. So that's one of our purposes at home, is to basically have him work toward mastery. And because he's homeschooled, he's not competing with anyone else. He is the valedictorian of Davis Academy, right? So because he's the only student, there's no competition. He's not competing against anyone else. He is working toward mastery at his own pace. And I know that that works for him. And it's also good in that he has in his mind just the same as in fourth grade. He knew that his fourth grade teacher would not allow him to fail. Failure was not an option. He had to keep at it until it was A quality. The same thing we do at home. In essence, whenever he has a project at home, I have him work until it is of A quality. And sometimes it happens very fast. Sometimes the A quality is very fast and he hits it right on. Sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes he needs to be patient with himself in terms of reaching A quality work. And then I, as a teacher, of course, and a parent, need to be patient with him and say, you know what, this is a little bit of a challenge. But as the teacher, I need to be creative in terms of sharing this information in a new way so that he can grasp it more. And work, both of us need to be patient in terms of working toward that mastery, right? And then it's such a joy and so rewarding when mastery is achieved and he's able to move on to the next thing. It's a really big relief for him. So we have purpose, right? In terms of parental pre-planning, you have to establish what is your purpose for your child. Okay. Next is passion, right? So you have to remember that as a parent, there are going to be times where we are going to have to literally take time, even if it's 30 minutes a day, to do our own work, right? There are times in the evening, typically it's after he goes to sleep. I call that my professional development time. That's time where I go online, and if he's struggling in fractions, I take 20 minutes out of my time at night, right before I go to bed, to say, okay, he's struggling in fractions, all right? What are best strategies for teaching fractions? I need to know that, right? So when we are parents who are educating our kids at home, from my experience and from what I've observed other parents doing in the 200 parents that I've worked with, that basically all of them take the time to develop themselves as educators. And basically center upon what their specific child needs. If the child is having a challenge in terms of sentence structure, take 20 minutes before you go to bed. Look up middle school sentence structure, Google it, and see what it says in terms of teaching kids about teaching sentence structure. And then try that the next day, all right? So it's definitely key that we take time to give our own selves professional development so that we can do an excellent job at home with our children. And I do know that a lot of parents are working full time and they're thinking professional development, what? I don't have time for professional development. And I think that my argument is, I know you work full time. Guess what? I work full time, right? Not only do I work full time, but I'm a single mother. So I'm in a situation where it's not like I can say, okay, my husband is teaching this subject, I'm teaching this subject, where we're sharing and I have all this extra support. It's all me, okay? I'm the teacher, I'm the principal, I'm the school counselor, I'm the school nurse, I am everything. I'm the professional development director. I'm everything within this one body. So, in essence, my argument is, I think that we all, as parents, I know it's challenging and I know it may feel overwhelming, but I really do believe that we have so much knowledge at our fingertips. And, and I think that you can so easily find strategies just through a simple search. And within 20 minutes, you have a strategy to help your child in XYZ, and you can utilize that during the week. Okay. And I suggest people just make a habit of taking 15 to 20 minutes a night to just develop yourself as a teacher, and your child will be so enriched by it. So that's the passion that needs to be involved, and if you don't feel passionate yet, because I know a lot of people are feeling so overwhelmed, working at home, feeling stressed out. They're saying, Dr. Davis, how am I supposed to feel passionate about this? Well, I think one way to feel passionate about it is, I think you can think of it in terms of, this is an opportunity for you to mold your child and to offer your child a type of learning that's so rewarding and enriching, and and that speaks to them, okay? That speaks to them and that brings so much joy to them, all right? And it's going to cultivate this joy and love of learning for them. And you're going to be the one to provide that. How awesome and exciting is that? I think it's awesome and exciting. So if you don't feel passionate, think about the benefits and the joy that your child is going to gain from you taking this 15 minutes a night to develop yourself as an educator and then to share with them to make learning more interesting and rewarding for them. They're going to love you for it, just like I love my own mother for it, for the time that she took into me. And note, my mother, award-winning educator. She used to be an educator with St. Louis Public Schools, and she won awards for her excellence in teaching elementary school. So award-winning educator and author Linda Davis, she worked full-time when schooling me, right? So I think that when you have this, when you observe multiple people who have worked full time at various jobs, they're even families that I console and work with now. Both parents prior to the crisis worked full time. They were just very creative in terms of when the schooling happened. You know, sometimes because of their schedules, sometimes homeschooling would not begin until 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. But they just simply made it work, and their kids are doing awesome things. So I just want to stress how it's possible to be creative, and it's possible to bring so much joy in your child's learning. And it's a wonderful experience. So we talked about purpose. We talked about the importance of having passion as a parent educator yourself, and also persistence. All right. So I know that sometimes the process can be challenging, right? You know, some of us are not used to seeing our kids the entire day, right? We're not accustomed to that anymore. And because we are working full time, sometimes that poses challenges as well, right? But I want to encourage parents to be persistent, right? And to know that there are millions of people worldwide who have been educating their own children at home and working full time at the same time. Not hundreds, not thousands. Millions of people have been doing this for many, many, many years, right? So it is possible. And I just want to stress the importance of persistence, because even I've been doing this full time for over a year. And yes, there are some challenging days. My son's 11. He's what they consider a tween. And sometimes he has a tween attitude. Okay. And sometimes the tween attitude is not very pleasant, right? But during those points, I, as a parent, need to be persistent, right? And to say, you know what? Yes, this is not the best day for learning because of the tween perspective here. But, you know, we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through this together, right? So I think persistence is very important for this as well. And for parents to, particularly during difficult moments in home education and where you need to exercise your patience more than others, to think long term, right? To think long term. So when you're feeling frustrated, you know, and my son, he basically wants to be the next Bill Gates, right? He has big goals, and he should, right? So during those times where it is challenging, you know, because of you know, 11-year-olds attitudes sometimes are not always the most pleasant. During those times, it's important for me, Dr. Davis, to remember, Dr. Davis, you are training the next Bill Gates, all right? So yes, it is a little challenging today, but think long term, right? We're training the next Bill Gates, so let's just beef it up here. Be strong and persistent, and all will be well. And I think that when you think long term like that, it helps you get through the challenging moments that may arise. And they're children. They're children. Challenging moments will arise. They're children, right? But we have to be the adults in this situation and say, you know what, this is challenging right now, but I'm not going to give up on you. I'm not going to give up on you understanding this concept. I'm not going to give up on you and what you say your dreams are. I want that to happen for you. So I'm not going to give up, right? And that's the attitude we need to take as parents, as parent educators, right? That persistence is critical, right? Next, I wanted to go into homeschool health. I think health is also a key component within all of this, okay, within home education, also particularly during this time of social distancing. So even before the period of social distancing, I made emotional health and healing a key part of our homeschooling experience, right? I think that there's so many things that needed to be healed within our family. So healing took a key role within our homeschooling experience, right? So I teach him regularly, we have the growth mindset. So that helps with the mental healing of, you know what, I can do this, and that I can achieve anything if I put my mind to it. That's the emotional health component. Everything from making sure he takes care of himself in terms of exercise, making sure that he takes care of himself in terms of thinking about what he's eating and how is that going to affect him physically and mentally, right? So emotional health, physical health, all of those things are very important in our household. And I think that those are just life skills that parents can teach their children during this time and make it part of the curriculum. I know that I make it part of our curriculum in terms of the curriculum that I developed for my son, in terms of learning how to deal with challenging or negative thought patterns, learning how to deal with failure, learning how to deal with any type of conflict. I consider that life skills, and I put that in our curriculum because it is a life skill. And it's something that's important that I think he needs to learn as a young man. And that I know that once he becomes that huge technology CEO that he will become, that he's going to be a better businessman because of the life skills that he's learning now, right? Good. Also, I think it's important to think about intellectual health. And what I mean by that is, I think it's important, and I've noticed that this is common. I don't want to say how common it is, but for most parents that I've witnessed, they allow the child in some way, shape, or form to guide the learning process, right? And part of that is to allow the child to have some piece of ownership in the learning process. And that ownership is going to motivate them. It's going to make learning more interesting for them. So what do you mean, Dr. Davis, in terms of having the child have ownership in terms of learning? Do they have the credentials for this? I would say most definitely so. All right. To give you an example, my son, he's 11. He loves superheroes. I actually like superheroes too, but we both love superheroes, right? He loves them more than I do. And to give you an example of making things relevant for him, he is very much into the Flash. This is real talk. He's very much into the Flash. So I told him, well, during the interview with Miss Elise, your assignment is to write a paper on your favorite Flash episode. And in the paper, you need to make sure that each paragraph is at least 3 sentences long. You need to attend to all the spelling. You need to attend to all the grammar, all right? And that's how I'm going to evaluate you. Also remember how that in every paper you have an opening and then you have a concluding paragraph, all right? And make the reasons why this episode is your favorite as the central topic, all right? So what are we doing here, Dr. Davis? Basically, I'm taking something that this wonderful 11-year-old finds interesting and fascinating, taking this thing, and I'm saying, you know what? You can love it, but we need to have some learning going on while you love it, okay? So the learning that's going to go on is you're going to produce this short paper, all right? And in essence, this is teaching him writing, grammar, composition, right? He's practicing his composition. And because it's something he's so interested in, it's going to happen more naturally, right? And he's actually excited to do it, right? He's like, oh my gosh, I get to actually write about the Flash? Yes, that's your assignment, to write about the Flash. Do it well, because again, at Davis Academy, which is what we call our homeschool, it is mastery based. So he knows that if it's not done up to par, he has to revisit it and keep revisiting it until it's A quality, right? So he knows that. So he knows, and he knows that he doesn't necessarily want to have to go back and forth and spend, days and days on this short composition. So I have a feeling that it's going to be quite well done the first time around, right? Because he knows that he's being evaluated in terms of mastery based, and that he prefers not to go back and do things over. So that's more motivation for him to do it well, right? And it's also something that he's interested in and that he loves. So he wants to represent the Flash well, right? So he's going to make sure that his paper on the Flash is done well. So these are ways that you can motivate children. Take something that they love, right? You may not love it as an adult, right? But take something that they love as a child, and then you put on your thinking cap as a parent and say, how can I apply writing to this? How can I apply mathematics to this? How can I apply history or social studies to this? That's your job as a parent. And once you do that and you connect it to the thing that your child loves, your child is going to have motivation. They're going to want to do this, right? And then the opportunity to be graded on something that they love, they will respond positively, guaranteed. Now, in terms of grades, there are some homeschoolers who grade. There are other homeschoolers who choose not to grade. I choose to grade, and actually my son, he prefers that. He figures, well, mama, if I'm going to be graded in college and if I'm going to be graded in graduate school, I might as well start getting used to grades now. And I agree with him. So I do grade him, but again, it's mastery based. So basically, we just keep working until he does A work, right? So that's the way we decide to do things. So we talked about the importance of homeschool health. That includes emotional health. That includes physical health, right? Teaching the child the importance of taking care of their bodies through exercise, through proper diet, right? We talked about intellectual health, making sure that the children know the importance of learning and that you provide them the opportunity to learn about what they love, all right? Finally, I wanted to conclude with a couple of resources that I think will be helpful for everyone who watches this video. The first one is simply social media. There are so many wonderful homeschool and home educator groups on Facebook and groups that have their own internet sites. And I know personally, I've become a part of some of these groups, and some of these groups are very active, and they actively mentor people who are new to the homeschooling experience. So I strongly encourage that. I've learned so much from these homeschooling communities, you know? And ironically, there's actually a specific, these are very specific sites. There's actually a specific Facebook group for single women who work full time and homeschool. There's actually a group, a formal group. And I was so thrilled to find it. And these women have the most awesome ideas in terms of how you balance work and family, because they're basically like me. They are the everything in their household. They are the breadwinners and they're also the teachers. So I've learned so much from these hundreds of phenomenal women. So definitely check out social media in terms of groups to join, and use the mentorship within those groups. The people within those groups find joy in mentoring and helping others succeed at home education. So I highly recommend that. I also highly recommend the public library. The public library has online resources available to anyone who has a library card. And on these online resources, the public library has full curriculum. I'm not talking about just one or two worksheets. The public library has full curriculum, every subject, from preschool all the way to 12th grade. They have full online textbooks. They have online videos in every subject, teaching everything from trigonometry to social studies. Is absolutely phenomenal. And these are free online resources that I know that I use and that many others use regularly. They're very high quality, and I strongly urge parents to explore the online library resources. In fact, the St. Louis County Public Library site, they have organized their public library site into categories in terms of online learning. So they have a section of online learning resources specifically for the students, but then they have another separate online resource category specifically for educators. You are now an educator. I encourage all parents to go to that online library educators source, and you will find so many resources, free online curriculum resources that are going to inspire you and to assist you in educating your child in a top-notch way. Well, I'm very excited now to answer any additional questions that we may have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. That was extremely informative. We did receive an overwhelming number of questions, and we will use the remainder of the time to get through as many of the submitted questions as possible. There were some similar themes among the questions, and we received quite a few about keeping your child engaged. So to get started with our first question, Dr. Davis, how do you recommend keeping a child engaged while teaching at home?
Okay, very good, very good. Well, my suggestion is, again, to find something that the child is already very interested in, right? And to create a fun activity related to that. And to think about the time that it will take them to engage themselves in this activity and the time that you want to do a certain bit of work, right? So sometimes and I think today is a perfect example of this, right? I shared with you that I shared with everyone that I'm online talking to you right now, right? And my son is in his room working on a paper on the Flash, all right? So that's an example of making sure that whatever the child is doing is something that they love, that they're interested in, right? And then think about, okay, how much time is it going to take them to do that? And then use that little bit of time to do a task within your work. Now, there are other strategies as well. You know, some people choose to, particularly if they're working from home and they have the flexibility, they choose to do their work for employment during a certain part of the day, and they may choose to educate their child at home when they feel like they have the most amount of time, which would be maybe 4 or 5. So there's so many ways that you can do it, but what I would strongly suggest, I think that so many times we as adults, when it comes to learning, we have in our head, okay, this is what I want the child to do. And then there's pushback from the child because the child may not find that interesting. You know, like if I were to tell my son, while I'm talking to Miss Annalise, go upstairs and write a report on let me think of something, on geometry. I could assign him that, right? But is he going to be excited about it? Is he going to be like, oh gosh, I got to make this really good? You know, I don't think he would have the level of enthusiasm as he has now, where mom said I could write about the Flash. Awesome, you know? So again, whatever it is for you, you know, and he's 11, so he's a little older. If you have a tiny child, let's say you have a 5-year-old, okay, you might have to get very creative. All right. If you have a 5-year-old, I read online that one working mother, what she did was she had some shaving cream that she didn't want. So what she did, now this is a little messy, but she was okay with it because she needed 30 minutes where the child was occupied but still learning and having fun. So basically what she did was she put shaving cream all over her hardwood floor, and she basically let her 5-year-old play in the shaving cream, and she told her 5-year-old to make letters with the shaving cream. So what is it? The kid's having a blast with the shaving cream on the floor, right? But they're also practicing the letters, right? Exactly. Totally engaged. Mama has 30 minutes to do what she needs to do while the child is having fun in the shaving cream. So this is like the level of creativity that parents are using. And not only is it creative and kids are learning, but um, you know, the kids are having fun, and it's just so memorable. I mean, how many kids can say, I got to draw in shaving cream while my mom worked, you know?
No, that's something I should try with my son.
Right. And it's something that the child's gonna remember, right? And your son's gonna love you for it years later, you know?
Right.
And it's a simple cleanup. I mean, all you have to do is once the activity's over, you know, just take a couple of large towels, clean everything up, and voila, you know? So
Yeah.
that's just one example. There's so many other examples, Annalise. But again, I think that you create engagement by just thinking about what is it? Think about the age level of your child and think about what is an activity they can do independently that will keep them engaged and they will love it. And then give me little pieces of time to do my work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And that's very helpful. I think we will have to try the shaving cream activity in our house.
He's going to love it. He's going to love it.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. So our next question is kind of similarly themed. What are some tips to keeping your child on task and focused?
Mhm. Yeah. I think you're right. It's very similar, right? I think that again, when you learn who your child is, you know who your child is, you know the interest of your child, right? That when you creatively apply what they're interested in to the activity, they're going to be engaged. They're going to want to do the activity. I think you mentioned lightsabers or Star Wars in a prior conversation, right? That is so rich with opportunities for learning, right?
Yes.
In terms of how can you creatively tie in Star Wars with the alphabet? How can you creatively tie in Star Wars with in terms of addition and subtraction? It can be done. And I think that when you connect what the child's interested in with the skill that you want them to learn as a parent, the child is going to approach learning in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that I think we probably should try and integrate this Star Wars themed activities into his curriculum. I think he would definitely find that very engaging. So yeah, these are really great tips for focus. There were quite a few questions about time management during the day.
Mhm.
With that, how much time do you suggest everyone should be working on each subject?
Okay. I have learned over the years, and even as recently as yesterday, I was watching a broadcast related to home education. And some are saying for each subject about 30 minutes per day, bare minimum, each subject,
Okay.
right? That's what some are saying. But then I also think it's important to, again, think about the age of the child, think about the temperament of the child, right? And think about what the child's needs are at that given time. All right. So, what I mean by that is there are some days where, for my son, we do not necessarily say, here's time for history, here's time for social studies, here's time for math. Not necessarily. There are some days where I purposefully integrate all of them, right? And I like those days because I think that they're not as rigid. I think that when you try to creatively integrate various subjects, that it's more fun for the child as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of strictly, so I would say my first answer to your question would be bare minimum 30 minutes a day. But if you're being creative, if you have an older child, if your child is helping you be creative, because kids are going to give you feedback, right? And I know even my son, he I wanted him to learn about charts and graphs so that he could better incorporate them in his science fair projects. So he, not me, he's the one who said, "Oh, okay, Mama. Well, how about I make a chart about the Avengers and then list all of the Avengers and then give all of the Avengers characteristics in the various rows and columns and then compare them?" And I thought, hmm, would learning be taking place? Technically, yes, right? Because my goal was for him to learn about the use of charts, right? And how to organize a chart, how to make it meaningful, you know. And he chose the Avengers, learning is still taking place. Now, what the next step is taking his idea, which is his idea, and I embrace that, right? Because I want him to love it and own it. But then we're going to have to take it to the next level because guess what? The science fair is due soon. That is true. St. Louis, the science fair is due soon, right? I think a lot of parents understand this now. And because the science fair is due soon, son, you need to take what you learned from your Avengers chart, which was wonderful, and apply it to the content in your science fair, right? So now he has to take the fun part. We made it fun first, but now apply it to the more serious science fair activity. And he's better able to do it now, right? Because he's learned how to do it properly, and now he gets to apply it in a more academic way. So again, I really think that when we listen to our children, and unfortunately, I think that in this society, we've been taught not to listen to our children, to not get their feedback, that we're the experts and they are empty vessels. They know absolutely nothing. They do know something. They know what they love. They know what they find as interesting. And I think that if we want learning to be joyful for them at home, that we're going to have to take that into consideration. And guess what? It's easier on you as a parent too, because when your child is laughing and smiling and proud of their work that still is academic, but is related to Star Wars, you're going to be happier too.
It does bring him great joy. So we actually had several questions about the next topic. And so, for someone who isn't trained as an educator, like myself, what is the best way to begin teaching a child how to read?
Oh, there's so many exciting and fun ways, all right? To give you an example, ways that cost very little to no money, all right? So the first thing I would suggest, and this is just an old fashioned, I mean, hundreds of years old technique, but one suggestion I give and that worked very well in my family is to simply label things in your house. Now, I know that some people just want their houses to look absolutely pristine and look as if children don't live there. But but if you want to teach your child how to read, you're going to need signs, okay? So, on the couch, write the word couch. Okay, so just get paper, and in a big marker in the regular letters, big letters, write the word couch. On his or her favorite chair, whatever chair they sit in for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, literally write the word chair on the chair. Put it on a large, maybe 8 by 12, piece of paper, and use tape to tape it on. Type the word chair. All right. The entrance to the kitchen. Write the word kitchen. So you can imagine my home when I was teaching my child how to read. There were signs. Oh yeah, yeah. There were signs everywhere. Table, chair, book, lamp. I mean, there were signs everywhere. But Annalise, it works. I mean, when the child connects, okay, that says that is a lamp.
Right.
And this is the way the word lamp looks. Lamp. Look at that. There's an L, there's an A, there's an N, and there's a P. The kid gets it.
Right.
And then if you leave it in the house for long enough, I mean, it's going to be second nature. It's going to help them to read so well. That's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is whenever, and I even do this with my son now sometimes, whenever the child is watching anything, let's say it's free time, and you say it's okay for them to watch Frozen. Let's say you have a kid who likes Frozen. Right? You say it's okay for them to watch Frozen. They should not be allowed to watch Frozen unless you have the subtitles on. All right?
Yeah.
So basically, whenever the kid is watching anything, cartoons, a movie, whatever, whatever it is, it needs to have subtitles, English subtitles. So what that's going to do is the kid is going to constantly see those words. They're going to hear what's being said, of course, right? But then at the same time, they're seeing the words attached to what's being said. They're going to pick it up.
Yeah,
They're going to pick it up,
yeah.
you know? Last suggestion. The last suggestion is, and okay, only, yeah, this is an encyclopedia, okay? Pardon. This is an encyclopedia, okay? The last suggestion is this. Whatever you read to a child, whatever it is, okay, whatever it is, excuse me, it's not the last suggestion. It's the second to the last suggestion. So whatever you read to a child, always point, okay? And I know it sounds very elementary, and in some people's mind it may sound a little picky, but what you're doing is whenever you're pointing to every single word, you're showing to the child, this is what the word means, and this is what the word looks like. So I point to the word paper. This is what the word paper looks like, right? And the kid's going to pick that up, all right? You know, and I think that this worked particularly well for my son when he was in his Dr. Seuss books. And I would point to every Dr. Seuss word, right? And then the way Dr. Seuss books, because they rhyme and because they're memorable, what's going to happen is if you keep reading the same Dr. Seuss book to your child every night and pointing to the words, eventually that child's going to remember what's on every page, right? And then that's when you come in and say, you know what? How about this? I read the first sentence on this Dr. Seuss page. You read the second sentence. Now, they may not be technically reading, but they remember the next line in that Dr. Seuss book, right? So as they're reading their line, you point to each word so they know what's coming out of my mouth. These are the words associated with what's coming out of my mouth. Annalise, by the time my son was like 3, he was easily reading Dr. Seuss books without my help. And it was because of that method, right?
Yeah.
And because of constantly pointing, he knew that this word was he knew that this word was go, right? And only 3, it can work. You know, I've seen kids as young as 2 reading with that method, right? Last suggestion is books. Well, now I'm dating myself. Books on tape or audiobooks, all right? And the trick is this. Audiobooks that are slightly above the kids' level of reading, all right? So to give you an example, I know some people do not like Harry Potter, but my son loves Harry Potter. And in essence, I learned that basically the first book for Harry Potter, the very first book, was age appropriate. I read somewhere that it was age appropriate for, you know, 2nd, 3rd graders, right? So he wasn't necessarily going around with that big, thick Harry Potter book when he was in 2nd grade. But what was happening was I would let him listen to the audiobook, right? The very first book. Mm-hmm. He loved it. He loved it, right? And then after a while, he was like, Mama, I want the real book. So we got the real book, right? So here he is, like in second grade, reading this big, thick Harry Potter book. But think about it, and think about it in terms of what I said a couple of minutes ago. Yes, he was in second grade, but because he had listened to the book so frequently
Right.
and enjoyed it, and now he has it actually in his hands, he was reading that book like a pro on his own with no help of an audio book, with no help from me,
Wow.
because of that strategy of listening and then remembering, okay, that's the word. Now here's the actual text in the book, and being able to reproduce that himself. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. That is incredibly impressive that he was reading that so early. Yeah.
Well, I mean, when you do it with a book or topic that the kid enjoys,
Right.
it will
Yeah.
happen
Big interest
effortlessly.
in
Yeah.
it. I could see that. So, just to kind of change topics a bit, we did receive a question requesting tips for working from home and also trying to teach 3 boys as a single parent. Do you have any tips on that?
Oh, most definitely. As I mentioned earlier, I work from home and I am a single mother. I do not have three. I have one. So I can imagine three. That's definitely more responsibility. What I would say is basically, I think organization is going to be very important. All right. So basically, that pre planning that I talked about, how we as parents need to pre plan and be intentional about what our plans and goals are for our children, what their needs are. It's going to be very important, especially with three, right? And to um, oftentimes what I see people with multiple children. Oftentimes the kids are doing activities during the same times. They may be doing different activities at their levels, but they're still doing it at the same time. Another thing that I've seen with parents having multiple grades within their own family, I noticed that sometimes what they do is the entire family is working on the same topic. However, the responsibility in terms of learning is different for different children. So, to give you an example, let's say we are studying the civil rights movement, okay? And let's say you have one first grader. Let's say you have a middle school student and you have a high school student. And you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, those huge age ranges, how are we ever going to cope? What some parents do is they say, guess what, family? We are studying this particular event in the civil rights movement. Okay. But each child is doing something a little bit different. Maybe the first grader maybe is reading a short level book related to the civil rights movement. And not only do they have to read the book, but they're expected to also draw a picture related to their favorite part of the book. So that's their task. That's, age appropriate, right? The next level, the middle level student, they're reading on the same topic, right? But maybe they're struggling in terms of their own writing at the time. So not only do they have to read a passage, but they also have to critique the passage and give a one-page critique of that author's work, one-page critique. And then the parent is going to be looking for grammar, et cetera, et cetera. Then the high school student, they're going to have to take it a step further, right? So maybe they're not doing a critique. Maybe the high school student has to create an annotated bibliography, Okay, so not only are they looking up additional sources related to the civil rights movement, but they have to give short summaries of each source. And then they have to group the sources in a way that makes sense within the annotated bibliography, right? So basically, the entire family is studying the civil rights movement, but each child is doing something a little bit unique based upon their own grade level. So that's another strategy I've seen for that single parents have used. And then as the three children are doing this, the parent is doing a specific task, right? Another thing that I've seen not only single parents do this, and usually the single parents I know happen to be single women who are working full time and homeschooling. Not only do single parents do this, but I've also seen where the husband and wife will incorporate the actual work that they're doing with the child. Okay? So to give you an example, I actually have done this myself. I teach, I do research, right? And one way that I do this is there are some pieces of work related to homeschooling where I actually want my son's perspective, right? Because yes, I'm the teacher, but isn't it useful to get students' perspective as well within this topic, right? So there are some pieces where he and I actually have co-authored a presentation. All right. So I give the teacher's perspective, he gives the student perspective. But think about this, he has work to do, right? Because in any presentation, particularly if it's a poster presentation, there is a written component because it's a huge poster, and the poster in text form gives the research, right? So there, when we were putting together our poster, he was charged with writing sections of the poster. When we were putting together our poster, he was in charge of sometimes editing sections of the poster. I would tell him, you see this paragraph, there are mistakes in this paragraph. Edit it. If he edited it correctly, I realize, okay, he's learning elements of grammar that I want him to grasp. If he misses certain parts of the editing process, it reminds me, okay, that's something we need to keep working on so that he can do this more fluently without me reminding him. That's how I integrate my child into my work. But some people who are entrepreneurs, I know one woman, she has a bakery and she creatively includes her two daughters into the business of the bakery, right? So when it comes to issues of accounting, she'll creatively create a math project related to accounting for the business, for the family business. She's very creative about it. So the girls are not only learning, but they're contributing to the family business. And that's a way that the mother feels as if she's doing two things at once, right? She's doing her work for her business, but at the same time, she's teaching very meaningful math skills and entrepreneurial skills to her middle school girls. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, I think those are very creative approaches. That's awesome. So we also received a question that I found extremely relatable with my son. Do you have any tips on helping kids cultivate a positive attitude and accepting that sometimes getting an answer wrong is just part of learning?
Yeah, that's very good, very good. Yes, again, I think I'll go back to the importance of developing that growth mindset and the importance of kids realizing, and I think that's one thing that is not always prevalent within the traditional brick and mortar school system, there's so much competition, right? There may be 15 kids in a class, so you're competing with these 14 other people, and sometimes it's hard to adopt that growth mindset just the way that the system is structured.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think that when you, the parent, are the main teacher, you have the capacity and the ability to constantly remind your child that, you know what, we both are always growing. We both are always learning. And guess what? Parents make mistakes sometimes. And when parents make mistakes, what do? We may feel disappointed for a little while, but we say, you know what, that didn't work out. Tomorrow we'll try something new. And to encourage the child to do the same, and to make that part of the homeschool experience, that we both are learning, that we both are growing, that we're both going to make mistakes. And you know what? Geniuses, our greatest inventors in our society, have made plenty of mistakes. I heard of one quote, and please excuse me because I do not remember the source, but I heard one person, a famous individual, once say that if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. You're not putting forth your true efforts in something, you know? Because mistakes are part of the innovation process.
Mm-hmm.
Mistakes are part of the creativity process, and mistakes are part of the process in terms of how do we get from mediocre to excellence, right? Getting from mediocre to excellence, there's going to be some mistakes on the line, but that's absolutely okay because we know what the goal is, right?
Right.
So I think focusing on that growth mindset and the fact that failure is okay. Failure is not the end of the world. Failure is just something did not work out at this given time, on this given day. So what do? We figure out what went wrong, what didn't work. We go back, retool, and we try again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is something that really helps. That's something that really helps kids. And I think even we as adults have to remember that failure is not the end of the world. So once we convince ourselves of that and take ownership of that and take ownership of learning from failure, and that it's okay and wonderful to learn from failure, and to realize that wonderful innovations happen as a result of failure.
Mm-hmm.
That once we understand that as adults and claim that for ourselves, that it's easier for us to share that with our kids so that they're not afraid of failure either.
Right.
That they just look at failure and say, okay, let's just get back up, dust ourselves off, and we're going to do this again. And don't we want that? Don't we want to develop kids who are resilient like that?
Yeah, definitely. No, that's definitely some tips very applicable for me with with educating my son. And kind of along those same lines, how do you think that parents should allow for failure on their part of their student as a teacher?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. That is similar. I think that it's good to recognize that growth can occur from failure, that innovation can occur from failure, right? And to not view failure as something that is a mark against the character or the ability of the individual. I think we need to take that away, to take that notion away.
Mm-hmm.
But to view failure as okay, again, this child is absolutely capable. This child, whatever they set their mind to, they can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So if they failed something and something didn't go well, we as parents need to get in our minds that that failure is not a failure. The child is not a failure. Just that attempt was a failed attempt, right? It's two very different things, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the attempt was a failed attempt, but the individual, him or herself, is not failure in the flesh. you know so we have to remember that and share that with our kids, and that, you know what, you know this attempt was not successful. Let's look at why it wasn't successful. And this is getting back into the mastery based way of thinking. Let's look at why this attempt was not successful, and let's work to fill in the gaps, right? In essence, when you think of it that way, failure isn't really failure anymore. It really is just filling in gaps and addressing things that we didn't understand. So when you think of it that way, it's almost as if failure does not exist.
Yeah. No, definitely. That's very, very helpful. Thank you. This next question involves resources parents may need when teaching from home. What programming do parents have access to when the school or the district is not providing online curriculum?
That's a very good question. I think it's very good because I think that a lot of parents mistakenly think that to educate online, it's going to be very expensive, that it's going to be costly. I'm sorry, I misspoke. I meant to say to educate at home, that it's going to be expensive, that it's going to be costly. But as I mentioned before, there are so many phenomenal free resources that we have at our fingertips through the public libraries, whether it's the St. Louis City Library, whether it's the St. Louis County Library, all right? So I think that that's important to remember, that there are full curricula, high quality curricula that the library offers from K through 12, every subject, every single subject. I was actually very impressed
Yeah, I
when
didn't.
I learned about it, actually.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Mhm.
Um, well, and so this actually brings us to our final question for you. What's the best online grammar resources to prepare high school students for college writing?
Okay. I have a favorite, and I my favorite is Purdue Owl. I love Purdue Owl. It's simply spelled. I have, sometimes people say I have an accent. I'll spell it because of my accent. OWL, Owl, and it's sponsored through Purdue University. And in essence, it's their writing resource center. They do a phenomenal job of offering various writing tools for people. And yes, it's meant for college students, but it really focuses on a variety of aspects of writing. And actually, I used to volunteer teaching high school students writing. And during our workshops, the workshops with the high school students, I would actually use Purdue Owl. And the students, these high school students were like, why didn't anyone ever tell us about this? Because it's so phenomenal and so rich, and it's free.
That's
So
awesome.
I highly recommend that for high school students who want to improve their writing, college students, it's very well done.
Very cool. Well, thank you. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Davis. Thank you for sharing your research and your knowledge with us today. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We hope that you found this helpful, and we hope that you would consider joining us for future webinars and virtual events. For more information about future activities, please visit alumni.slu.edu. Thank you so much.
Thank you.